Well, welcome back to another episode of the Grow Your Clinic podcast. My name is Jack O'Brien, your host. Super excited to be in the saddle today. We have another guest joining us, and not a clinic owner spotlight, as has been the series towards the back end of recording in 2020 and 21. Today, we have a guest, an expert, and a representative from Vold Health. We have Mark Opar, Head of Strategy, talking all things technology in healthcare. Mark, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jax. Thank you for having me. Look forward to chatting about it.
Yeah, we're going to have heaps of fun. Now, before we dive into Vold Health, I've got a couple of icebreakers for you, as per usual. Ready to go?
Yeah, shoot.
All right, number one, what are you reading or learning right now?
I'll give you a dry answer and a more interesting answer. I'm reading clinical terminology documentation at the moment, just about how we label conditions. That's the dry part. Then the other thing I'm reading at the moment is a book called The Mum Test. My performance equivalent pointed me in the direction of it. And it's about asking appropriate questions to get feedback from people in a useful, tangible fashion. It's called The Mum Test because whenever you ask your mum a question, your mum's great, she's going to say it's a great idea. And it happens quite regularly with feedback in general. So it's just around your framing and phrasing of your questions to be able to dig in there and actually get more useful, tangible feedback and have people tell you useful things rather than things they think you want to hear. Because we don't need to hear that our products are great. We need to hear what we need to do better.
Right. The mum test, was it?
Yeah, it's really good. I'm not an enormous reader, but a lot of value for anyone trying to start up a new concept or a new idea. I think it's a good starting point.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Okay, number two, who inspires you?
I probably 6 months ago couldn't answer this question, which was problematic, I think, in itself, to kind of understand what drives me. And I came to the realization late last year when we were working on an internal document around what our health vision is.
Right.
And I've come to the realization that young people inspire me. And I worked for a long time in under 18 football down in Victoria, where I'm from originally. And we've got a pretty young team here, and I'm always super impressed by how talented some of these people are at such a young age. And yeah, it just sort of crystallized for me that I really enjoyed that work in junior football, and I really enjoy this work here. And I think part of it is seeing growth and development in young people. I find it really exciting to watch people professionally grow, but also just personally become more sure of themselves, more confident in themselves, that they can kind of speak up. And yeah, so that's what pushes my buttons.
I like that. That's awesome. Number three, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
So I lived in Victoria my whole life, so I wanted to be an AFL footballer. It was fairly, I'm an Essendon supporter, unfortunately. Hoping it'll turn around sooner rather than later.
One day.
But I realised fairly quickly that when I maxed out at 170 centimetres, that AFL football probably wasn't going to be my calling. And then I suppose in reality from there, I don't think I really knew. You're forced to make a choice at 18. I really loved sport, and so physiotherapy was really appealing. So I got into that and worked clinically for 10 years. So I had to go the long way. I went through exercise science, which I think helped me as a physiotherapist. Sure. But I think if I could talk to 18-year-old Mark, I'd suggest that he does what makes him happy. I think I think that an aspiration like that is really helpful. But I can guarantee that 18-year-old Mark wouldn't have listened to me either.
No doubt. Finally, mate, what's the motto that you live by?
Yeah, I'll probably use them as guideposts. I've got more than one. I've got three. I try to be solution focused, and that came from working in football. That I sat in coaches' boxes in the under 18s competition from sort of being 19, and if a line coach identified a problem, they would typically get blasted. It was, so don't give me problems, give me solutions. And I think it's a really good mantra to try to operate. And I don't think the expectation is that you always have the correct answer, but I think it's taking the time and effort to give the person you're presenting the problem to some respect, at least giving it some consideration around how to solve the problem. So I really like that. And I've taken that from football, and I try to run with it as often as I can. And it is challenging sometimes. It's much easier to identify a problem rather than a solution. I've coined my own one from up here around, it's selfish but reasonable. And it's my job when I was looking after Telehab, which is where I started at Vold, as our exercise prescription tool. And we've got 5 other systems. So we're kind of competing against each other in a way for resources. And I made no bones about it that I'd be selfish about wanting the best for Telehab. I would push and ask for more resources, more engineers, time to do more things. But And I think most people are good at being selfish, but it was that reasonable part that is really important that I had to understand that Telehab couldn't win all the time. I didn't understand, and I didn't have time to understand all the other things that were going on in the business that needed to take priority. And I just accepted that when I asked and I pushed and tried to be selfish, that if my manager says, not this week, not this month, that I'd not sulk, that I'd be reasonable about it and understand that, you know, there's a bigger picture at play sometimes. So I think I've coined it myself, but I actually really like the concept. And then the third one was when I moved into this role, I'd never really managed people before, not to the extent I need to do now. And I was thinking a lot about how I wanted to manage people. And I thought about this concept of I wanted to be a shield for them, that I wanted to, so the people I report to, I wanted to protect my team from them. I didn't want to, sacrifice them to protect myself. I wanted to just sit there and take heat when things maybe weren't going as well as we wanted them to. But what someone else from the software team explained to me this concept of an umbrella, which I really liked, in that when it's raining, an umbrella is up and protecting people from the rain. But when it's sunny, the umbrella comes down and you let the sun shine on your team. And I think it's a phenomenal management philosophy, really, that you should protect your team when they need it, but when it's time, when they've done good work, let them shine, because they do work really hard.
I like that.
It's brilliant.
That is very clever. Okay, so connect the dots for us then from the young aspiring Essendon little short stack through to a physio and now head of strategy at a health tech company. Connect some of those dots in the career pathway for us.
Yeah, so I think for your typical audience, I'm a little bit different. I'm not a clinic owner, and I didn't start this business either. So it's sort of come from a different perspective. And I'm in a kind of a specialist role now, which I think as a clinic grows, the need for specialists actually becomes more important. I think early days when you need kind of those all-rounders, because you need people who are going to be able to solve multiple problems. But we're at a point now, and hopefully some of your listeners' clinics get to that point, where actually need people with really targeted specialist skills. So that's kind of what I do now. But like from the start, I started working as a physio, and very early on found that I was terrible at drawing my home exercise program. My stick figures were horrendous. There was an example once where a patient brought their home exercise program back into me, and I unfolded the sheet and looked at it. I didn't even know what I'd drawn, so that wasn't much help to them from a perspective of adherence. So I started using an online exercise prescription tool. To be perfectly honest, found it pretty average to use. It was hard to use, but I persevered because it was better than my drawings and it was better for my clients. So it was maybe hard work for me, but it was better for my clients. And I think that's always really important for us as health professionals, that sometimes we occasionally lose sight of doing what's better for ourselves rather than what's better for our clients. And I know it's a compromise between the time things take and trying to run a business and run a profitable business. But I think it's just a case of getting that balance right and reflecting on that every now and then. So I sort of worked clinically for a while. I probably drifted into autopilot, and I'd heard older clinicians talk about it. And it's scary that you don't even realize it, but you just sort of, it's just probably a little bit repetitive with what I was prescribing and not really a great deal of thought and individualizing things, which is hard to say, but the reality. And I started working with Vold a couple of days a week down in Melbourne, because we've got a lot of the AFL, all of the AFL teams down there. So just being able to help them out when they had issues and the like. So really pushed my buttons. And then we acquired ForceDex, which is a dual force platform company, probably 3 years ago now. And the exposure to that kind of reinvigorated me. I hadn't had a lot of exposure to force plates, and they are intimidating the first time you see them. But I think particularly for physios, we don't get exposed to them a lot.
Sure.
So I certainly found it intimidating at the start, but then it just opened my mind up to different ways of assessing people. And then as a result, like my assessment and objective measurement actually guiding how I prescribe to them. So ForceDex can actually identify force qualities through different phases of the movement. So your eccentric unloading phase, your concentric phase, and then your landing phase, and actually starting to look at where people were deficient and prescribing exercise to target the deficiencies was I found it really stimulating. And then secondary to that, we've just got a wealth of expertise within the company around force plates. So being able to listen and talk to those people, and I talk about it as a force plate journey that you go on. That I think as physios often we think asymmetry is really bad, and I was similar. I wanted to get everyone asymmetrical, and then the guys would say, well, we work with NBA players who jump off their right leg 90% of the time. symmetrical is probably not normal for them. So just understanding those type of things was really, really useful. So that was kind of my origin story to getting to Vold for the most part.
Okay. And for the uninitiated, and of course, it's not a blatant sales pitch for Vold, but give us the 411. There's a couple of different products. Like, what is Vold Health?
Yes, so Vold started with the Nord board. It measures eccentric knee flexor strength. So most people say hamstrings, but the calves contribute to that movement as well. And it boomed in elite sport. Really, there was a huge demand even before the company started, which for any like aspiring founder of a company, a market demand before you start your company is a pretty nice thing.
So the word, just for those, maybe there's a bunch of speeches and OTs and sites.
Okay,
like
yeah.
Board, kind of like Nordic curls.
Yeah, it's a Nordic hamstring curl is basically an exercise where you someone holds onto your ankles and you basically lower down to the ground from your knees, and it exposes the hamstrings to a super maximal eccentric load for the most part. Very few people can control it to the ground. Controversial exercise, but in terms of the evidence base, it prevents injury. There's not a paper out there that says it increases the risk of injury. There's not a paper out there that says it makes people slower. Does it make people quicker? I'm not sure it necessarily matters, but that's one of the things that comes up. But very, very solid evidence base that it reduces the risk of hamstring injury, which is obviously a huge problem in elite sport. It costs sporting clubs a lot of money. Losing 3 weeks of someone who's on a significant amount of money is a very costly problem. And from there, we had English Premier League clients asking that it was great that we could monitor hamstring strength, then wanted to start monitoring groin strength as well, because that's another common injury in that space. So we built a system called the groin bar. Initially, it's been renamed the force frame, it's basically a fixed dynamometry system. And a dynamometry is basically a device that has a load cylinder that measures force. And from there, basically, it's very flexible. So we've renamed it the force frame to kind of reflect that it measures a lot more than just groin strength. It can do upper body, lower body, there's some neck measurement reliability studies out there now as well. So it's a super flexible device. And then we've introduced Force X, which is a dual force plate system as well, and a motion analysis system called Human Track. And Human Track was probably our first, targeted offering into health. Being able to actually measure range of motion and the like is
beyond just
something
conditioning performance.
Yeah, who are interested in those force production qualities, which obviously allied health professionals are interested in. But range of motion and balance and center of mass is also an important consideration for us. And then we acquired a blood flow restriction company, so a wireless blood flow restriction. So blood flow restriction is actually a really effective way of growing muscle for people who can't lift heavy, and it's 20 years of very solid evidence behind it, but it's been pretty cumbersome previously. So have to have wires connected up or manually pump this device. It's incredible that no one had actually thought about it. Like I say to our guys regularly, it's a great idea, but it has a little engine in there. It just pumps up the calf, increases the pressure, monitors your blood flow occlusion, which I think is important because health professionals are often a little bit nervous about adopting blood flow restriction for safety concerns a lot of the time, which are fairly unfounded actually if you're solid in the way you screen someone. And then finally, Telehab, which is where I kind of started with the company in running that as a system, is an exercise prescription tool. So that obviously appealed to me, that I was using something in my clinical work that didn't necessarily satisfy all the things I wanted to. So we've built Telehab, and the unique feature of it is that you prescribe an exercise program to someone's phone, but they actually record themselves performing their exercise on the phone, and that actually gets sent back to you. And it's not like live teleconferencing. It can be asynchronous. So if someone calls up and they're having troubles with an exercise or they're super sore, you can actually get onto their account and maybe watch how they're doing their exercises as well. So I think there's some things in there for the future. I realized that sitting down and watching someone perform their exercise program when you're not necessarily billing them is a consideration for anyone running a business. But I do think going forward that I think insurance companies will be interested in it from a perspective of adherence. And that was the idea of it. It's a tool aimed at improving adherence, because exercise is very powerful as a therapeutic tool. It's a great challenge to get our clients to complete their programs at home.
No, that's awesome. I think for listeners, whether you're in the sports or musculoskeletal space where some of these products will be relevant, or perhaps not, there's some really key insights and threads I think we can pull on, Mark, from your team and leadership. You mentioned the young people, and so many clinics are employing young graduates, all the way back through to how tech can improve the workflow of practitioners, relevant across all health domains, and you've obviously got some assessment tech there. We've got some prescription tech there, and it works nicely. Can you let's speak to that piece now? How does technology improve the workflow for a practitioner?
That's a good question. I think technology has to fit into the clinical workflow rather than the other way around.
For how long we've tried to push tech into the clinical space, and it's just hard. Like, it's more trouble than it's worth. You mentioned the old exercise prescription softwares, and it's more trouble than it's worth. Is that evolving, getting better now, you think?
Well, I think that's our mandate. That's why I kind of worked on this health vision from above me, to try to work out how we can bring our objective measurement prescription into an integrated tech solution that I think an expectation that users are going to kind of adjust what they do. I don't think that's going to get mass adoption. Yes, there'll be some people who are super committed to it and will go out of their way. And I think those people, I think they're the people we should aspire to be like. They're very solution focused. They find ways. They don't get bogged down in limitations. But unfortunately, I don't think that's a large percentage of the population. So we're really working on, we've got phenomenal technology in terms of the quality of objective measurement. What we're really working on doing is trying to actually streamline it into the clinical workflow. So actually make it a lot more seamless so that there's less barriers to actually adopting it. So that's really what we're trying to work on. But I do think it does come back to what you mentioned there with the sort of trade-off between ease versus quality of measurement for the client. I still think we need to keep that in the back of mind. We put a lot of value in assessment. Technology is phenomenal in that it's going to be reliable and it's unbiased. So I think if we put a lot of value in assessment, good quality assessment should be what we're aspiring to do. Yes, and there's that middle ground between good quality assessment and speed. And that's where we're trying to merge the gap a little bit more so that you have really high quality assessment information to go and make better decisions. That's why we assess with our eyes and with our hands. And that's what you should be doing with technology as well. It should guide your decision-making processes as 100%. Well.
And I think it's obviously best practice from a clinical perspective, but I think about the clinic owners that are listening across all subspecialties, and it's an experience that we can provide for our clients that creates a point of difference from your friends in the same space down the road. And it shows our patients or our clients that this isn't just guesswork. This is science. It's objective, it's provable, repeatable, testable. And so that creates certainty for our patients, which therefore means they're more likely to buy into buy is not the right word, to commit to our management plans and plans of treatment. So what would you say though, Mark, to the clinic owner who's got team members who are a bit resistant to tech? Maybe they fall into the guruism kind of thing. I trust my hands, or I trust my own judgment. So team members that are a bit resistant to embracing technology, how would you suggest a clinic owner approaches that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you've got to get buy-in, I think is probably the key. And so we completed an internal presentation 3 or 4 months ago, and part of it was that we're about to embark on a really exciting 2-3 year process. And certainly if we deliver on the vision, it is going to kind of revolutionise what we do with the clinical workflow, which is has us all really excited. But the purpose of this internal presentation was to excite the people who are going to be doing a lot of the grafting, like with 25 software engineers who are going to have to be doing a lot of work. And there's going to be times when things don't work and I'm going to be demanding, they're going to hate me. But if they're excited and have buy into it, that it stops becoming a job and it becomes a passion for them. So I think finding a way, and it's probably about understanding the individual, and it gets back to what makes them happy. Like how can you understand what makes them happy that's going to probably encourage buy-in into this? Because I don't think a one size fits all approach will necessarily work. And then I think that the next step of that is once you start to get some buy-in, having an internal champion is really, really important as well, because you mentioned people who are tech resistant. There's a few aspects of that yes, they're tech resistant, but there's also an element of defensiveness as well, that they're not familiar with it, and the default position. And it happened to me with force plates, that I felt like an idiot the first time I was exposed to them. And as a result, you kind of just shy away from it because we don't want to feel, no one likes feeling stupid. And I didn't enjoy it. It was very uncomfortable for me. I remember the weekend really, really clearly, and was just extremely uncertain about how I fitted in with the company. And that, that's 2-3 years ago. I've come a long way since then. But having that internal champion that can hold the hand of those ones that are a little bit more resistant and take them through the process, maybe actually run the testing for them initially and help them with understanding the metrics, because I think you are right that it's really good for the clients. And the phrase that we often get is that there's buy-in, that they engage with the numbers.
Sure.
The significant challenge of that is as soon as a client buys into the numbers, the immediate question is, what does that mean? Uh-huh. And if someone is not capable of answering it, they will shy away again, because it's a case of trying to protect yourself. And we're about to do a significant amount of work on that, on making that easier to guide people through that, so they do feel a little bit more comfortable in being able to adopt. But it takes time. Like, I don't think an assumption that you bring in tech and the tap opens on referrals, it's not going to be like that either. You're going to need to invest a little bit of time into it as well to establish some processes and some protocols so that you can get the best out of it as well.
I think that's a really good point, around that leadership, and we can't just buy something from Vold, throw it to our clinical team and hope they embrace it. It doesn't work like that. I know we've got some airbands in our clinic, and we've been just playing with them at a weekly CPD, just playing and fiddling and getting used to the workflows amongst each other in a safe place. We can get familiar with the tools so that when you're doing it with the client, you don't look silly when you're doing it with the patient. You're looking in control and confident with the tech in front. So that's some really good points there. Let's touch more on that leadership and team leadership then. You said you've got a young team, you love working with young people. How do if you're a clinic owner who's got some new grads started, or even perhaps some clinicians that are a bit older and they've come from a different work environment, how do you draw out the best in your team?
Yeah. It's an ongoing process for me. I think I need to continue to work on it as well. I communicate heavily, possibly to the point of over-communicating, but I just try to touch in with them regularly. I'll often ask them, do you like working here as well? And it's maybe a little bit upfront and confronting. And I hope you can often tell.
Why would you ask that question?
Well, I want to know if they don't enjoy their work, because I want them, because I've come from this perspective of, I really enjoy this job. It really makes me happy, and I want them to be the same. And it reminds me of I've got a mate who I played golf with a few months back, and he's a greenskeeper now at a top 10 course in Australia.
Right.
And he spoke about grass for 9 holes. It was very boring. It was not interesting to me, but I was delighted for him that he's so passionate about it, that he just loves talking about it. And I just want that for everybody. So I want to ensure that they're enjoying what they do, because I think that they will drive themselves then in that case, I think in a lot of cases. So I know when regularly, we throw some pretty ambitious things at them and some big meaty jobs. One of my more junior engineers has just finished working on something she's been on for 3 months. Mm-hmm. And I'll often say at the end of that, what annoys you about the platform? Like, what do you want to do better? What do you want to work on, so that it's something that, that they have a bit of ownership, I suppose, of it. And that's probably I think the key. Being able to give them ownership is a really important, powerful thing. And to do that though, you have to have trust. And trust is enormous. I've come to realise that, having never owned a clinic, but stepping into this role, you can't buy it, really. It's absolutely critical. And when you have it, it's amazing, because you don't have to hold hands and micromanage them. You can kind of let them run and trust that they're going to make the right decisions, but also trust that they'll come back to you to ask you at the right time as well, because you don't need every little mundane question to come through you. But you need them to be able to recognise when there's this, overarching, things that might impact on the business that you do need, because it's for clinic owners, it's your ship that you're steering. I've observed it from this company that they started from a startup 5 years ago. You've put a lot of your life and your time into these things. You've invested a lot into it. It's really, really hard to take your hands off the wheel, but your business is not going to thrive if you just keep your hands on the wheel the whole time either, I don't think, because there's just too much to do. So being able to put your trust in people, I think, is really important. And when you don't trust someone, I think you have to identify that and find their niche, potentially, where you can trust them, Or I think that sometimes you have to make hard decisions as well, because it's just too hard. Otherwise, you just spend too much time. You end up micromanaging. No one likes being micromanaging, and no one wants to do it. But invariably, I think that's where it stems from.
Yeah, that's interesting and really useful. And I know that clinic owners often struggle with that tension of, wanting to release and empower their younger, older, any of their team, but yet wanting to have confidence that the culture and the values will continue to be upheld along the way. Let's talk about young people. How do you bring the best out of young people specifically who maybe don't have the experience or lack a little bit of insight at times, maybe they're go-getters and full of energy? How do you find you bring the best out of young people?
I think you have to. I think it's about nurturing them. Like it's about, and it goes back to communicating with them. You're talking with them constantly. You're understanding their perspective. I think understanding anyone's perspective is always really important because it explains behaviours as well. So if they've made choices that you maybe don't think was the right choice, understanding why they did that, and often it's typically an attempt to please. I think a lot of the time they're so keen on actually pleasing you that they want to do things quickly and they go and do things rashly. Yeah. And sometimes you just got to, and so certainly in my role, I just try to encourage them to dial them back, and I say to them quite regularly, just do it well. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It does. But I say to them, I'll take the heat if it goes over, like it runs over time. Like I'm not going to say, they're fluffing around, it's taking them too long. I encourage them to just take a step back, make sure they do the quality of work is there, rather than trying to just please. Because I think when you try to please, they end up just jumping from task to task, because I think the byproduct of trying to please is that they don't prioritize well. Something just comes up, like you'll make an off-the-cuff comment, and they'll drop tools on a project that you think is the most important project, and they dive onto that, and they continue to just dive around, and nothing gets finished in the end as well. So, I just think it's continually communicating with them, understanding them, reinforcing them when they do things well. I think is really important. You are trying to reinforce positive behaviours, and then when you do see something that you maybe you think is less than ideal behaviour, and I need to work on that, it is just to kind of herd them into a direction. And I'm not sure I necessarily succeed in herding. Sometimes I can get a little bit snappy, because if things impact, like we're building things for practitioners, if choices are made that go and impact a practitioner, like to me, that's a critical error. So I sometimes need to just kind of pull myself back. And I think that's probably a useful one for clinic owners as well, that sometimes just to take that step back and just be a little bit measured and considered with how you're going to nurture them and try to draw the best out of them as well. And then again, understand them. Like I think it comes from working in football. I think it's really important to try to develop a relationship. I'm not sure if necessarily a friendship is the right word, but I think it can work quite well, because it makes the delivery of feedback a little bit easier, rather than an employer to an employee. People just take it better. And it sort of reminds me of one of the coaches that I worked with for a long time, who would say that he will never critique you as a person. It's a critique of your decisions and your actions. But human nature is that when you get feedback, you do take it a little bit personally. But I think it's always much easier to take on a foundation of a good relationship. So spending time with them, and that's probably partly why I communicate with them so heavily, is that it's about forming a relationship, and it's not just about work relationship. It's just about getting to know them as a person as well.
It's a great insight, and I was working with a group of clinic owners just this week on their induction processes for new team members, and how we often suggest to take 100 days for a 0 to 100 program. It takes a long time to build trust and create safety for those practitioners to do a good job, not just the fast job. We sometimes think a good induction is getting them up to full caseload within the first month, and it's not. We'd much prefer a full caseload after 3 months. They've learned how to do things the right way. So
yep,
makes a lot of sense.
I agree with that. I think processes and getting those things in is. I'm a heavily process-driven person as well, but I think I'm also extremely fortunate that I've walked into a company that's just got I don't love the word, but a phenomenal culture. Like it's a great place to work. So we've got a barista and a chef. So we have breakfast and lunch put on for us every day. There's coffees put on for us through the day as well. We've like table tennis table there. There's sort of Friday social drinks as well. So it's an enjoyable place to come to as well. So I know that the guys who start up, they want people to want to come to work as well. You know, they want it to be a place where you're happy to spend time, because the nature of a startup and starting up your own clinic, it's incredibly hard work as well. I probably don't have an appreciation. I've probably seen it from afar a little bit about how hard it is, but there's an incredible work ethic that's kind of flowed through here as a company as well. And it's hard to expect people to work really hard if they don't, you know, they're not happy, they don't enjoy where they are, and they don't enjoy the people that they work with as well. So that dynamic is really important. And I know my boss, a lot of his hires, and he doesn't hire as quickly as our CEO wants him to. Our CEO is a man in a hurry. He just says, hire more engineers. My boss, he looks for a cultural fit. He looks for people who are, yes, they need the skills, but they need to be able to fit in with what we are as a workplace as well.
Mate, really fascinating. As we land the plane, if you had some words of advice for clinic owners who are maybe on leadership or maybe on integration of tech and strategy, what would you say to the clinic owner?
I think I've said about enough. Like, do what makes you happy as well. I think you lose sight of that sometimes. I've spoken about that a lot about with your team. You have to do the things that make you happy as well, because it's I assume it's a pretty hard grind at times. And, you know, I'd imagine that the last 12 months is probably a prime example of that, where people have been, I think probably for the first time in healthcare, kind of faced your business, the mortality of your business, probably in many cases as well. So, you know, through those hard times, you've got to genuinely enjoy what you do. So it's going to be a lot easier to be able to put back into it and get through those hard times. Just build relationships, understand people. And I've been fortunate to you know, sort of mentor may not be the right word, but associate with people. And I pick and choose. I'm not necessarily one that goes and, you know, reads something and just goes and adopts everything. I'll take little bits and pieces from there. I don't think you should follow anyone to the letter of the law. I think you just should be, because it doesn't fit with your scenario all the time. So take bits and pieces, listen, observe, read, whatever kind of tickles your fancy. There's a lot of different mediums to absorb information, and take those bits and absorb it and apply it into what fits into your setting. But I think it does. A lot of the people I've observed who I'll try to take things from, they're exceptional at building relationships. They take the time to get to know people. So I think from a leadership and team building perspective, that is critical. And then from an integrating tech perspective, no doubt you be patient, realize you're gonna have to put some time into it. It's our job to start making it easier for you as well. So that's what we're working towards. So embrace technology would be the other thing. I think it's hard to make a change. Like, you've done something forever. To make a change is not easy. And many of you will often have what I sort of refer to as success validation, that you get people better. And you put that down to a lot of the things that you've done. Sometimes there's some other confounders there around time, but realize that it's coming as well. Like, whether you like it or not, if we do it well, it will make your life easier. And there's going to be a push. I think insurers are going to start getting more and more interested in proper objective measurement against what I refer to as kind of subjective objective measurement, pushing with our hands, looking with our eyes. They're going to want something that they know is actually consistent and repeatable. And when they see change, they know it's change. When they don't see change, they know that something needs to be done about it as well. So that would be, I think, my bits around kind of bringing technology in. There was one other that I had in the back of my mind, but it's kind of gone through to the keeper.
As it comes to, I think they're so related, that embracing tech and, like you touched on, relationship team and that philosophy of embracing, I think huge. You can't embrace tech and we can't roll it out across our team unless we've got great relationships with the people that we're leading. And I feel like they're a little bit philosophical, but they're so key. Yeah, leadership in relationship, it's philosophical. In tech, we can have all the processes, but unless it's coming from a spirit and a philosophy of embracing, it's probably going to collect dust in the corner, either physically or virtually.
And I think it applies to everything as well, just beyond technology as well in general. I think that as a concept, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Mark, that's super insightful. Thank you for your time. If people wanted to maybe get in touch with you personally or to learn more about Vold and the suite of products that are available, how can they do so?
Yeah, it's probably the best way is to head to Vold Health, so VALD, I should say in the background there if we have the camera on, .com. And then if you'd like to email me, m.opar, O-P-A-R, @vold.com. I'm happy to share that out as well, Jack. That's not a problem. Yeah. I hope that there was something in there for the people listening today. It might not be necessarily the typical podcast you've had. I'm certainly, I wouldn't call myself a successful business owner or anything like that, but I hope there's some little bits and pieces in there that you can take and maybe apply going forward.
Yeah, I think listeners, you're astute and you're listening to this podcast because you value client experiences and you value, inspired team leadership. And so therefore, Mark, I think there's plenty of gold in there. Listeners, what we'll do is we'll make sure all the show notes, links, examples are over at clinicmastery.com/podcast. Everything will be over there and you can check out Vold and get in touch from that. That's clinicmastery.com/podcast. There we go. Another episode. Mark Opar, Vold Health. Thank you for joining us on the Grow Your Clinic podcast.
Thanks so much, Jack. Really enjoyed it.
And listeners, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your reviews and ratings on your player of choice. And we can't wait to bring you another episode of the Grow Your Clinic podcast again really soon. Bye for now.